Good morning, beauties. This is Dr. Lisa. Hey, I wanted to chime in really quick this morning, Friday morning, to talk about autism. And I wanted to do that for you. It only takes a few minutes for me to clarify a couple of things. And the reason I'm doing it is because there are some of you who are questioning whether or not you should have your kids assessed for autism. And so I'm going to break down a couple of things for you, and then you can make a decision about whether or not your kids should be tested. Now, I've talked about this a couple of times, but I don't think I was as detailed. So let's get the details going on, right? All right, so when we diagnose autism, when psychologists, psychiatrists diagnose autism, one of the things that we use to do that is the DSM-5, right? This is the revised edition, the TR. So everything that we diagnose in mental health comes out of the DSM-5. Now, when we talk about autism, remember, we are diagnosing autism based upon two different areas. So the first area is social communication and social interaction deficits, and the second area is restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviors. So many of you always question, even to me, well, how do we know this is not ADHD? It is because of the restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So set that point to the side, okay? When it comes to social communication deficits, we can diagnose kids starting at about 1.5 years old, right? Even before they turn 2. Some of you get really hesitant because your kids are young. You don't have to be hesitant. I know it's scary, but you don't have to be hesitant because we don't diagnose autism unless we have evidence that the child has autism, right? And so if your child fails to have that back and forth communication, right? Maybe it's not even speaking yet. Kids do say words by the time they're 18 months to 2 years old. So many of you will say things like, oh, give the kid time to talk. You know, my kid didn't talk until my child was 3. Those things might be true, right? However, most parents are right about their kids, and we should stop making them feel bad about it, okay? If your kid has trouble talking, it doesn't mean they have autism, because remember, we have a whole different set of criterion that we have to use called restrictive and repetitive patterns of behavior. However, it is concerning. So even if we don't go the route of having kids tested for autism, you need to try to figure out why your kid is not speaking yet, okay? Now, does your child initiate social interactions, share their interests, even non-verbally, grabbing your hands, pulling you over to things that they need? You can learn a lot about kids just by watching them on the playground. Is your kid more solitary, going up to kids at the park? Or is your kid going off over here, not interacting with other kids? Is your kid interacting with you in play? Do not be in denial about these things. Do not say, my kid interacts, because when I go up to my kid interacts with me. A lot of times I see parents who say that, and then when I am observing behaviors, it's actually the parents going up to the kid and forcing the child to interact and play. If that's you, that is not your child socially interacting with you or using interactive play. Okay? You know, and that's really important. Look for imaginative play. Look for social imitative play. Some of you don't know what that means, so we're going to add Jesse and Buzz real quick, and I'm going to show you. This is imaginative play. Watching your kid play in their imagination. Just like this. This is Buzz, this is Jesse, and they're just kind of playing. Imitative play. You are Jesse and I'm Buzz, right? And you go over here. Jesse's going over here. And Buzz is like, Jesse's going over here. That is imitative play. They are very important to monitor Okay, kids should be doing that before they turn 2. Look at their eye contact, look at their body language. Do they have any unusual behaviors as far as their body language? Sitting in the W position, sitting with frog legs, just being in kind of odd positions, with their body and comfortable that way. Constantly moving. Having a lot of activity is not always ADHD, and kids that are 7 and under are too young to be diagnosed with ADHD. Okay? Now, there are other things that we look for under that category of social communication and interaction deficits. So we are also looking at facial expressions. Your child's facial expression, but also are they able to read the expressions on the faces of other people? For example, you can read that. That looks like a look of irritation, right? Right? Or maybe you can see that I'm actually a little bit irritated this morning, right? It's because I'm tired, right? Kids with autism have a hard time. They struggle with understanding the facial expressions of other people. So these are just a couple of things to look for. This is not all of them. It's not an exhaustive list of symptoms, and every kid is different, okay? Every single child is different. I'm trying to work at the same time that I talk to you guys. So when I look off to the side, sometimes it's because, I'm trying to work. So there are other symptoms that we look for in kids that are considered social communication deficits. Now, we also look at restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. So sometimes even when I'm trying to determine whether a kid has autism or not, one of the things that I can definitely rely on, other than what I call the psychology Bible, is I look for restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. So I'm going to give you some examples of what it means when we talk about they have unusual motor behaviors, okay? So hand flapping. See your kids hand flapping or unusual hand movements, okay? Toe walking. Some toddlers toe walk anyway, okay? So toe walking is also one of the symptoms that we look for in autism, okay? We also look at pacing behavior. So it's your kids, some of the parents call it doing laps. Doing laps, okay? Repetitive jumping. Kids jump anyway. This is different. It's more of a stimming behavior, okay? When we know that, once we have enough symptoms to diagnose autism, okay? Because, of course, little toddlers, they just jump anyway because they just get so excited, right? Now, spinning. Is your child spinning in circles? Just spinning, lining up those toys. Yes, that's a symptom. It is. Repetitively, just kind of lining up those toys. Echolalia, scripting, idiosyncratic phrases, restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, rigidity. Is your child hard to move to different activities because they're so focused on what they're doing? Okay, struggling with transition, struggling with small changes in your environment. Listen, I do this every day. There are so many kids that are not diagnosed. Autism seems like it's on the rise, but actually it's underdiagnosed. I've seen a lot of kids who have, by the time they're 12 and 17 years old, have a lot of mental health challenges because they themselves don't understand what's happening. I've had to come back, my colleagues have had to come back and reassess these kids only to learn that they have autism. So if you even suspect that your kid might have autism, stop thinking that it's a stigma. Mental health is not a stigma. Stop thinking that they're too young to be assessed. There are some pediatricians who tell clients, just wait, they're too young to be assessed. If they have all of these symptoms, including rigidity in eating, strong attachment to unusual objects, if your spoons are missing, guess what? That could be a symptom of autism if that child must have those spoons and get significantly distressed when they cannot have the spoons. Okay? Sounds, sensitivity to sounds, high tolerance to pain or temperature. These are just things that I want to bring to your awareness, because this is how, we tend to look at symptoms for autism. And so I kind of get a little bit disappointed when I encounter families who tell parents, and I'm getting ready to release a blog about this, to ignore those symptoms, or that's just what boys do, or they'll be okay, or you had speech concerns and you're okay, or what's wrong with playing solitary? Why is it that there's a problem with my kid playing solitary? Let me tell you the difference, right? If you do not have autism and you play solitary, when your teacher calls you to the table, you go, right? Even if you don't want to. You are not rigid, right? If you go play solitary on the playground and then the teachers say, all right, they ring the bell, it's time to come in for recess. You know what happens on the playground? You come. You participate in sports, okay. You don't need prompting to go and engage with other individuals. So everything that you are seeing within your child, you can justify and say, well, it happened to me and I'm fine. This is different and you know it. This is different. You are fine. You are wonderful. You are beautiful, and so is your child. So if you start to see symptoms in autism, you definitely have to pursue that. There are a lot of challenges when you don't pursue it once these kids go to school. Now, I always say to you all, especially parents, your children are beautiful. I've had little cute toddlers, right? I know they have little fat legs and they're cute and they're bouncing around, walking on their tiptoes. However, if you notice other symptoms, it's all right to seek an evaluation to find out if this is actually autism. We can do that via telehealth. Why? Because we can eyeball symptoms of autism. That's what we had to do during COVID. We use exams to assess kids for autism. We don't just eyeball. We also have data, empirically proven data, that will help us to determine with you whether or not your kid has autism. Okay? Autism seems scary. When I was in school, let me tell you something. We didn't have applied behavior analysis. We didn't have different goals that could be used, for children that seemed different back then, right? And we did not have ABA therapists and, strategies and interventions that we have now. So some of you view autism as a diagnosis that will hurt your kids. Actually, what will hurt your kids is denial. I see parents every day who cry because they waited a significant amount of time in order to have their kids diagnosed. And it's never too late. And I share that with parents. But what you want to do is early intervention. So if your kid is under 3, contact Birth to 3 in your state. Let them help you to assess your kid. Do not wait for speech and language therapy, guys. Do not wait for physical therapy and occupational therapists. Speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists. Those are the 3 practitioners that you want helping your kids. And if they start to tell you that your child has autism, you need to listen to them, especially occupational therapists. They are very good. I'm a fan of occupational therapists. They are very good with working with children in general who need their assistance, but also and especially children that have autism. I've had a lot of parents actually come and get testing and tell me, my occupational therapist, my OT said my kid had autism. I always say, well, We'll figure it out together. But more than likely, they are right about it because I have not encountered an occupational therapist yet who was right. And they work closely with speech and language pathologists. So, together, if they share with you that they think your child has autism, please listen to it because by the time your kid gets in kindergarten, they should have an IEP, an individualized education plan, and strategies in place that correlate with your state's criterion to get your kids services. You will thank all of us as practitioners once your child hits school if you start early, get them diagnosed, get them the help that they need, so by the time they're in second and third grade, they understand how to deal with their own symptoms, and you are not receiving calls every day from your principal or counselors or other administrators in the building because your kid speaks but has other behavior concerns and you are constantly going to the school. Guys, I've seen this plenty of times, and the kids actually had autism. And when they're older, they don't understand what's wrong with them. They just think that they're different. And when they're older, they'll tell you, I was different the whole time. I didn't understand it. And then they cry to me because they never had help. Please make sure that if you see any of the symptoms that I talked about, and remember there are more, find out whether it's autism or not. Don't be afraid of it. Deal with it head on. It's good to know, and it's good to act early, and it's also good to get the strategies in place to help your child, specifically language services, okay? The other thing that the public talks about, and that I know for sure works for kids with autism, is applied behavior analysis, ABA. There's a misconception about it. When children with autism function within their own world, right? It's their beautiful world. ABA doesn't try to change that world. That's a misconception. If we could all go into the world of a child with autism, that would be fantastic. These kids are brilliant. Sometimes I want to know what they're thinking, but they won't tell me until they feel like it, right? However, their world has to be merged with our world. And the way that you kind of merge it is to teach them to do it, right? And this is something that we learn to do when we're about 18 months. But for children with autism, it stays disconnected. And through the kind of testing that we do as psychologists, we can figure out whether their worlds are still disconnected. So ABA is a behavior therapy, applied behavior analysis. It comes in to kind of merge the two, and it increases their social skills. It increases their functional communication. It increases their speech. Those are the things you want to do, because remember, the babies are going to grow up and they have to be able to function on their own. They can't function on their own if they're stuck in their world. Now, if they want to hand flap at school, or they want to rock around with, unusual hand mannerisms, they can. But at the same time, I want them to learn. And sometimes restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior and social communication deficits, they get in the way of that learning. It's no different than a learning disability. It's no different than ADHD or other behavior concerns. They get in the way sometimes of functioning, more times than not, with autism. So if they want to go hand flap, they can. You can even put things like that in their IEP, right? That they need a little bit of time by themselves, maybe with their social worker in school or the counselor in school. Counselors and social workers will love to walk down the hallway and let them walk on their tippy toes. Yeah, that's what they want to help kids, right? But then when they come back, they need to sit down. They need to learn their ABCs. And that's what ABA is trying to train them to do. ABA is empirically proven. meaning that there's a ton of research about it and it works. I hear from parents every day who are very thankful that they put their kids in ABA. Okay, so I'm giving you the side eye because that's another symptom. I'm gonna side eye you because you are hesitating to get your kid assessed, right? Go ahead and do it. There's nothing wrong with checking. There's nothing wrong with checking. So you can always ask me if you have questions, okay? But please stop making people feel bad about wanting to find out, parents, whether or not their kids have autism. And calling mental illness a stigma. It's not. It's not. People who do that have no idea what it's like either to fight for mental illness or to be a person who is diagnosed with a mental health condition. But I support you. If you have questions, make sure you contact me. Otherwise, you all have a great weekend. Bye-bye.